The footsteps start at night. She knows exactly who's walking up there. The laugh she recognizes. It's the woman her husband installed in the apartment directly above her bedroom. Princess Yekaterina Dolgorukova, 29 years old. The Empress is 55 and dying of tuberculosis. The ceiling is thin enough that she can hear them. The talking, the laughter, the sounds of the life her husband built with another woman while his wife lies in bed, coughing blood into handkerchiefs, feeling her lungs collapse day by day. Empress Maria Alexandrovna of Russia, the woman who gave this man 25 years, who bore him 8 children, who helped build the institutions of a modern empire. She dies on June 3rd, 1880, knowing she's already been replaced. 40 days later, exactly the minimum mourning period the Orthodox Church allows, Tsar Alexander II marries Yekaterina in a private ceremony. He deposits 3.3 million gold rubles into her account. His children refuse to attend. Court servants resign in protest. But none of that matters anymore. The Empress is dead. The Mistress is the new wife. And the 8 children Maria Alexandrovna left behind are about to discover that their mother's death was just the beginning. Because here's what happens next. In 11 months, their father will be blown apart by a revolutionary's bomb, both legs shattered, abdomen ripped open. He'll bleed out in the Winter Palace at 3:35 in the afternoon. One son will take the throne and reverse everything his murdered father built, then die at 49 after his kidneys fail from holding up a collapsed train roof. Another son will be sitting in his carriage, passing through the Kremlin, when a terrorist throws a nitroglycerin bomb directly at him. The explosion will tear off his head, his upper chest, and his left arm. His fingers, still wearing their rings, will be found on a rooftop. His wife will kneel in the snow and gather his body parts with her bare hands, then visit his assassin in prison and forgive him to his face. The assassin will refuse her forgiveness. She'll sell everything she owns, become a nun, and 9 years later, the Bolsheviks will throw her alive into a mineshaft with 17 other people and leave them to die slowly in the darkness. Another son will lose the entire Russian fleet to Japan in the most humiliating naval defeat in history. His mistress will attend the theatre wearing diamonds so enormous that the crowd screams she's wearing the fleet on her ears and a cruiser on every finger. He'll die in disgrace in Paris at 58. The youngest son, the gentle one, the one who loved God more than power, will be stood against a fortress wall on January 28, 1919, alongside 3 other Grand Dukes and executed by Bolshevik firing squad. Their bodies will be thrown into a common grave. The only surviving daughter will marry Queen Victoria's son, watch her own son shoot himself during a family anniversary party, then die trapped in Germany during World War I. A Russian princess in a country at war with Russia, mourning 2 destroyed empires simultaneously. And the son who becomes Tsar will rule for 13 years, then die at 49, passing the throne to a son who will lose the entire empire and get his entire family executed in a basement in Yekaterinburg. This is what happened to the 8 children of Empress Maria Alexandrovna. And their story starts with the woman who died listening to the sounds of her own replacement living directly above her head. But before the bombs and the firing squads and the mineshafts, there was a 14-year-old girl in Darmstadt who had no idea what was coming. Princess Marie of Hessen by Rhine was born August 8, 1824. Her childhood was shadowed by scandal from the start. Her parents, Grand Duke Ludwig II and Princess Wilhelmine of Baden, had been estranged for years. Court whispers said Wilhelmine's youngest children weren't fathered by the Grand Duke at all, but by Baron August von Senarklang-Gronsey, the Grand Master of the Stables. When Tsar Nicholas I of Russia heard the rumors, he was considering Marie as a bride for his son. He dismissed them with one line: "If Ludwig recognizes the girl, that's good enough for Russia." Marie's mother died of tuberculosis in 1836, the same disease that would kill Marie herself 44 years later. The 11-year-old was left in her father's cold, austere court. Her only real companion was her brother, Alexander, who would later make a scandalous morganatic marriage that founded the Battenberg line, the bloodline that would eventually flow into British royalty as the Mountbattens. In March 1839, 20-year-old Cesarevich Alexander Nikolaevich of Russia arrived in Darmstadt on his grand tour. He saw 14-year-old Marie and fell immediately. After a long engagement, forced by her age, Maria arrived in Russia in September 1840. She converted to Orthodoxy as Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna. She married Alexander on April 28, 1841, in the Grand Church of the Winter Palace. On February 18, 1855, Alexander became Tsar Alexander II. Maria became Empress. At the coronation the following year, the imperial crown nearly slipped from her head, caught only by a fold of her cloak at the last second. Witnesses whispered it was a bad omen. They were right. As Empress, Maria Alexandrovna refused to be decorative. She became supreme patroness of the Russian Red Cross. She established Russia's first all-female gymnasiums. She built a network of hospitals, almshouses, and shelters across the empire. The Mariinsky Theatre, still standing in St. Petersburg today, bears her name. She read Turgenev with her husband and quietly encouraged his greatest reform, the emancipation of the serfs in 1861. But the Russian court hated her. Too German, too serious, too plain. Behind her back they called her German-style bourgeois milk. She didn't care. Between 1842 and 1860, she gave Russia 8 children, 6 sons and 2 daughters. The first, Grand Duchess Alexandra Alexandrovna, died of meningitis at 6 years old, buried in the Peter and Paul Cathedral. The pain of that loss never left her. The surviving children were Nicholas, born 1843, the golden heir, brilliant and beloved, groomed to rule the world. Alexander, born 1845, the spare, built like a bear, never expected to matter. Vladimir, born 1847, cultured, drawn to art and military glory equally. Alexei, born 1850, destined for the navy, destined for disgrace. Maria, born 1853, the only surviving daughter, a prize for dynastic marriage. Sergei, born 1857, rigid, conservative, cold even as a child. Pavel, born 1860, the baby, gentle and devout, the one who would die last and worst. Each had a role. Each had expectations, and watching them grow up in the palaces of St. Petersburg, the Winter Palace, Tsarskoye Selo, Peterhof, the Empress had no way to know that every single one of them would be touched by assassination, execution, exile, or ruin. But the destruction of her family wouldn't come from outside Russia. It would come from inside her own home. The affair started in the mid-1860s. Princess Ekaterina Dolgorukova was 16 years old when Tsar Alexander II, then 47, first noticed her. By the time she turned 18, he'd made her his mistress. She was 29 years younger than him, younger than some of his own children. For years, he kept the relationship semi-hidden. But by 1870, Alexander stopped pretending. He installed Ekaterina in apartments inside the Winter Palace itself. Not in a separate building, not in a distant wing, directly above the Empress's bedroom. Think about that. Maria Alexandrovna, dying of tuberculosis, lying in her bed at night, could hear the footsteps of her husband's mistress pacing the floor above her head. She could hear voices, laughter, the sounds of a life being lived by the woman who'd replaced her while she was still alive. Between 1872 and 1878, Alexander and Ekaterina had 4 children together. 3 survived. The Empress knew about all of it. The entire court knew. The children knew. And there was nothing any of them could do. The humiliation accelerated Maria's decline. The tuberculosis, the same disease that killed her mother, worsened. She began coughing blood. Her weight dropped. She grew pale, gaunt, skeletal, and through it all, the footsteps continued above her head. On June 3, 1880, Empress Maria Alexandrovna died in the Winter Palace. She was 55 years old. She was buried in the Peter and Paul Cathedral in a sarcophagus carved from pink Urals rhodonite. 40 days later, the absolute minimum mourning period, Tsar Alexander II married Yekaterina Dolgorukova on July 18, 1880 at Tsarskoye Selo. He gave her the title Princess Yurievskaya. He deposited 3.3 million gold rubles for her security. His children were appalled. His eldest son, now Tsar-in-waiting, refused to acknowledge her. Court servants who'd been loyal to Maria Alexandrovna resigned in protest, but Alexander didn't care. Rumours started spreading that he planned to crown Yekaterina as his new empress. He had 8 months to live. March 13, 1881. Sunday afternoon. Tsar Alexander II's armoured carriage travelled along the Catherine Canal embankment in St. Petersburg. He was returning from a military roll call. His route was known. The revolutionaries of Narodnaya Volya, the People's Will, had been waiting. At 2:15 p.m., a young man stepped forward and threw a bomb at the carriage. The explosion damaged the vehicle, but left Alexander standing. He stepped out to inspect the damage and check on his injured Cossack guards. That's when Ignacy Hryniewiecki moved in. He threw a nitroglycerin bomb directly at the Tsar's feet. The blast shattered both of Alexander's legs. It ripped open his abdomen. His face was mutilated. He was still conscious. Someone ran to get Yekaterina. She arrived and knelt beside him in the snow and blood. He was carried to the Winter Palace, the same palace where his first wife had died listening to them 9 months earlier. Alexander II died at 3:35 p.m. He was 62 years old. His son, Alexander, the spare who never expected to rule, became Tsar Alexander III that same afternoon. His first act was to cancel the constitutional reforms his father had signed that very morning. He issued a manifesto reaffirming absolute autocracy. He moved his family out of the Winter Palace to the fortified Gatchina Palace, 45 kilometers away. And he expelled Yekaterina Dolgorukova from Russia. She left for Nice, France, where she would live for the next 40 years. The woman who'd lived above the dying Empress, who'd married the Tsar 40 days after his wife's death, was sent into exile with her money and her children and nothing else. The 6 surviving children of Maria Alexandrovna now ruled and lived in a Russia transformed by their father's murder. And one by one, the empire would devour them. The first to die had actually been gone for 16 years already, but his death changed everything. Tsarevich Nicholas Alexandrovich was born September 20th, 1843. From birth, he was the future. His grandfather, Tsar Nicholas I, ordered his 3 youngest sons to kneel before the infant's cradle and swear allegiance. His tutors adored him. One believed Nicholas could become the most educated and liberal monarch, not only in Russian history, but in the world. In September 1864, Nicholas became engaged to Princess Dagmar of Denmark. The match was perfect. Dagmar's sister Alexandra had married the future King Edward VII of Britain. The alliance would bind Russia, Denmark, and Britain together. But Nicholas had been suffering from terrible back pain. His doctors said rheumatism. They were wrong. It was cerebrospinal meningitis. By early 1865, Nicholas was bedridden in Nice on the French Riviera, dying. His family rushed from across Europe. His father with brothers Vladimir and Alexei from Russia, his brother Alexander from Italy, Dagmar and her mother from Denmark. On his deathbed, Nicholas did something that changed Russian history. He took his brother Alexander's hand. He took Dagmar's hand. He placed them together and whispered his dying wish, that they marry each other. Nicholas died April 24th, 1865, at Villa Bermel. He was 21 years old. The golden heir, the liberal hope, the future, gone. And Alexander, the spare, the one built like a bear who'd never been trained to rule, was suddenly heir to the largest empire on earth. He would marry his dead brother's fiancée. and their son would be the last Tsar of Russia. Alexander Alexandrovich became Tsar Alexander III on March 13, 1881, the day his father bled out in the Winter Palace. He married Dagmar, now Empress Maria Fyodorovna, on November 9, 1866. Theirs became one of the few genuinely happy Romanov marriages. She was small, elegant, warm. He was massive, blunt, loyal. He never took a mistress, never strayed. After what his father had done to his mother, Alexander would not repeat that betrayal. His reign was defined by one word: reaction. He reversed his father's reforms, tightened censorship, crushed universities, pursued aggressive Russification of minorities, enacted the May Laws of 1882, anti-Semitic legislation that triggered mass Jewish emigration from Russia. He became known as the Prisoner of Gatchina, rarely leaving his fortified palace. He lived in fear of bombs, and he was right to. But Alexander also oversaw Russia's industrial boom under Finance Minister Sergei Witte. He began construction of the Trans-Siberian Railway. He forged the Franco-Russian alliance that would reshape European power and lead directly to World War I. He and Maria Fyodorovna had 6 children. Nicholas would become Nicholas II, the last Tsar, executed with his family. George died of tuberculosis at 28. Xenia had 7 children. Her line survives. Michael, briefly proclaimed Tsar after Nicholas's abdication, was executed by Bolsheviks in June 1918. Olga died in Toronto in 1960, the last Grand Duchess. In 1888, Alexander's train derailed at Borki. 21 people died. According to legend, Alexander held up the collapsed dining car roof while his family escaped. The effort damaged his kidneys. By 1894, he had chronic nephritis. He travelled to Livadia in Crimea to recover. He only got worse. Despite extreme weakness, he insisted on receiving his son's fiancée, Princess Alex of Hesse, in full military dress uniform. Alexander III died November 1, 1894, at Livadia Palace. He was 49. The last Tsar buried at Peter and Paul Cathedral. The man who reversed his father's liberalism produced the son who would lose the empire entirely. Grand Duke Vladimir Alexandrovich lived 2 lives. In one, he was Russia's greatest patron of the arts. In the other, he was the man who authorized Bloody Sunday. Born April 22, 1847, Vladimir served as president of the Academy of Fine Arts from 1876 until his death. He financed Diaghilev's early ventures. He oversaw construction of the Church of the Saviour on Blood, built on the exact spot where his father was blown apart. In 1874, he married Duchess Marie of Mecklenburg-Schwerin, who became Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna, known as Mieczen. She was ambitious, forceful, Lutheran. She refused to convert to Orthodoxy for 34 years. Their Vladimir Palace on Palace Embankment became the social centre of Imperial St. Petersburg. They had 5 children, including Grand Duke Kirill, who'd later declare himself Emperor in exile. January 22, 1905. Workers marched peacefully toward the Winter Palace, carrying icons and portraits of the Tsar. They wanted to petition Nicholas II for better conditions. Vladimir, as commander of the St. Petersburg garrison, chaired the meeting that authorized deadly force. Troops opened fire. Hundreds killed and wounded. The massacre ignited the 1905 revolution. Vladimir died of a cerebral hemorrhage February 17, 1909. Buried in the Grand Ducal Mausoleum, the man who financed Russia's greatest art also authorized the bloodshed that began destroying the empire. His branch would become the most important for modern Romanov succession claims. Grand Duke Alexei Alexandrovich was born January 14, 1850, made General Admiral of the Russian Imperial Navy in 1883. He commanded Russia's entire fleet for over 2 decades. His legacy can be summed up in one brutal phrase: fast women, and slow ships. Before the disgrace, Alexei became briefly famous, touring America from 1871 to 1872. He met President Grant, participated in the Great Royal Buffalo Hunt in Nebraska with Buffalo Bill Cody and George Custer. Alexei missed 12 straight shots before Buffalo Bill handed him his own rifle, and the Grand Duke finally killed a buffalo. His personal life was expensive. His most famous mistress, French ballerina Elisa Balletta. During the Russo-Japanese War, she attended the theatre wearing diamonds so enormous, the audience screamed she wore the fleet on her ears and a cruiser on every finger. The joke had weight. Under Alexei's command, Russia entered war with Japan catastrophically unprepared. The Pacific Fleet, destroyed at Port Arthur. The Baltic Fleet, sent halfway around the world as backup, annihilated at Tsushima in May 1905. 21 Russian ships lost, nearly 5,000 sailors dead. The public called Alexei the Prince of Tsushima. Stripped of all posts, June 2nd, 1905. He retired to Paris, Avenue Gabriel. Died of pneumonia, November 14th, 1908, at 58. First person buried in the Grand Ducal Mausoleum. The celebrity Grand Duke presided over Russia's most humiliating naval catastrophe. Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna, born October 17, 1853, was the only daughter to survive childhood. On January 23, 1874, she married Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, Queen Victoria's second son. Both Orthodox and Anglican ceremonies at the Winter Palace. Victoria had opposed the match. A bitter fight erupted when Alexander II insisted Maria keep the title Imperial Highness and outrank the Princess of Wales. Maria never liked Britain, too provincial compared to St. Petersburg. When Alfred inherited Saxe-Coburg-Gotha in 1893, Maria found her role. They had 5 children. Prince Alfred shot himself during his parents' silver anniversary in 1899. Died 2 weeks later. Princess Marie became Queen of Romania. Princess Victoria Melita married Grand Duke Kirill. Her descendants claim the Romanov throne today. Princesses Alexandra and Beatrice married into German and Spanish royalty. After Alfred died of throat cancer July 30th, 1900, Maria lived as Dowager Duchess in Coburg. World War I trapped her, a Russian princess in Germany at war with Russia. The collapse stripped everything. Lost her duchy, her Russian fortune. Her nephew, Nicholas II, murdered with his family. Maria Alexandrovna died of a heart attack October 24, 1920 in Zurich, buried in Coburg beside her husband and son. Born in Europe's wealthiest court, died in reduced circumstances, mourning 2 destroyed empires. Grand Duke Sergei Alexandrovich, born May 11, 1857, was perhaps the most hated man in Russia. Rigid, conservative, physically frail, he wore a spinal corset to hide his tuberculosis, cold authority that earned enemies everywhere. In 1884, he married Princess Elizabeth of Hesse, Queen Victoria's granddaughter, elder sister of future Tsarina Alexandra. The marriage was childless, never consummated. Sergei told his brother Pavel he'd never have children, but he and Elizabeth, Ella, shared genuine emotional connection. They became guardians of Pavel's orphaned children. Appointed Governor-General of Moscow in 1891, Sergei immediately expelled 20,000 Jews from the city. His governorship was stained by Kudinka. May 30, 1896, stampede during Nicholas II's coronation killed at least 1,282 people. Sergei refused to resign. Nicholas refused to fire him. Public called him the Prince of Kudinka. February 17, 1905. Sergei's carriage passed through the Kremlin's Nikolskaya Tower gate. Ivan Kalyaev threw a nitroglycerin bomb directly at him. The blast killed Sergei instantly. His head, upper chest, left arm blown off. His fingers, still wearing rings, found on a rooftop. Elizabeth rushed to the scene, knelt in the snow, gathered her husband's remains with her bare hands, had his tombstone inscribed, "Father, release them, they know not what they do." She visited Kalyaev in prison, offered forgiveness, he refused. Elizabeth sold her jewels, left court. In 1909, founded the convent of Saints Martha and Mary in Moscow. Dedicated her life to caring for sick and poor. May 1918, Bolsheviks arrested her. July 18, 1918. One day after Nicholas II's family was murdered in Yekaterinburg, Elizabeth was thrown alive into a mineshaft at Alapayevsk with 17 others, left to die slowly in darkness. Later canonized as New Martyr Elizabeth by the Russian Orthodox Church. The man who expelled Jews and presided over massacre was married to a saint. Grand Duke Pavel Alexandrovich, born October 3, 1860, was the baby, the gentlest, most devout. June 17, 1889, married Princess Alexandra of Greece, 2 children, Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich. Dmitry's birth killed his mother. Alexandra went into premature labor after an accident, gave birth, never regained consciousness. Died 6 days later of eclampsia. Both children raised by Sergei and Elizabeth. Pavel's second marriage destroyed him, 1902. Married Olga Karnovich, a divorced commoner, in morganatic ceremony in Italy without Tsar's permission. Banished from Russia. Stripped of titles and income. Their children given surname Paley. Eldest son Vladimir Paley, gifted poet, murdered at Alapayevsk with Elizabeth in 1918. Pavel returned, 1914, commanded Imperial Guard during war. Arrested August 13, 1918. January 28, 1919. Peter and Paul Fortress Courtyard. Grand Duke Pavel Alexandrovich, executed by firing squad, with Grand Dukes Dmitry, Nikolai and Georgy. Bodies thrown in common grave. The gentlest brother. The one who loved God. The one the Bolsheviks shot. Pavel's bloodline survived through the son whose birth killed his mother. Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich helped assassinate Rasputin, December 29, 1916, with Felix Yusupov. Nicholas II banished Dmitry to Persia, exile that saved his life. When Bolsheviks hunted Romanovs, Dmitry was beyond reach. Settled in exile, married American heiress Audrey Emery in 1926. Their son, Paul Romanovsky-Ilyinsky, became mayor of Palm Beach, Florida in 1989. Only known Romanov descendant in elected office. Today, Maria Alexandrovna's bloodline spans Europe. Through Alexander III's daughter Xenia, 20 Romanovs carry the name. Through Vladimir's grandson, Grand Duke George Mikhailovich, Romanov presence returned to Moscow, lives there with wife Victoria, children Prince Alexander and Princess Kira. Through Grand Duchess Maria, bloodline flows into Romanian, Serbian, Greek, British royalty. Princess Margareta of Romania descends directly. The Empress, who died with her husband's mistress living above her head, could never know her bloodline would survive revolution, World War, 70 years of Soviet rule.